After remaking all Scorpion finishers ranked a couple of weeks ago, it only made sense to follow it up with the rival to the poster boy, Sub-Zero. Similar to Scorpion's ranking, my main is in need of an update, so today we'll rank all 34 of Sub-Zero's finishers from the worst to the best.
Fight!
Good morning, afternoon, and evening everyone, Nick here, and welcome to or welcome back to the channel. If you're new or a returning viewer and haven't done so, spine rip the subscribe button and join the Whack Pack today for some more MK rankings and Mortal content. Last month, I decided to re-rank all of Scorpion's fatalities, full of new opinions and new titles, including MK1 and the GBA titles. We're gonna do the same thing with Sub-Zero as, similar to Scorpion, his video feels outdated and needs a major update. To refresh this a little bit more, I decided to include some of his censored fatalities, something many of you have commented about in the first video I've done a while back. As always, these are my opinions. I'm ranking these based on how cool they are, no pun intended, and how well it fits the character, and how well it succeeds at what it's attempting to do. With that, let's get ready for a spine-chilling video as we rank all 34 of Sub-Zero's finishers from the worst to the best. Similar to the last re-ranking we did, we're changing things up with the bottom spot. This time, we're going to the classic MK on Game Boy. Due to hardware restrictions on the Game Boy, fatalities, finishing moves, were altered quite heavily or downscaled crazy for the Game Boy, which gets us over to Sliding Knockout, which sees Sub-Zero slide across the screen and knock out the opponent. That's it. You'd think this is just a basic punch or someone just accidentally messing up the fatality prompt input, but no, the game labels this as a finishing move, similar to Toasty and similar to the cartwheel kick. For that, this makes us eligible to count on this list. This is honestly so embarrassing. At least Liu Kang's shell and uppercut fit the character. This just looks like you messed up the fatality. Like, this is just so stupid. Like, it's so terrible to the character who was responsible for the ESRB, and they were just done so dirty. Like, what the hell? Alright, I gotta calm down on this one. Sorry I lost my cool there. At least the worst is out of the way. We are not finished looking at altered fatalities as we are visiting the Super Nintendo version of MK Classic. Yet another terrible altered finisher to fit Nintendo's family-friendly nature. Sub-Zero delivers a powerful uppercut that knocks out the opponent. Honestly, it would have easily cracked the top 10 if you took notes from TJ Combo and sent him into the stratosphere. However, this only happens if the blood code is turned off. And speaking of, all finishers moving forward either require the blood code or have the cojones to be bloody as hell. So let's keep moving forward with the rest of the list, shall we? Finally, looking at the original bottom spot, UMK3's Spine Rip. I understand the team wanted to satirize how controversial the original Spine Rip was back in 1992, but this is just a shame, especially since a majority of UMK3's finishers are extremely lacking. With the big update, I honestly expected a better finisher from classic Sub-Zero, aka the ESRB maker, and just like the screen effect, my expectations faded.
Sub-Zero wins.
From originally landing at the second to last spot to now fourth to last, hey, progress is still progress, am I right? With the Deadly Alliance Skeleton Rip. This is honestly an odd fatality. For one, this really feels out of character coming from Sub-Zero, and second, this is literally Kano's MK3 finisher. Why they couldn't have gone with an ice-based finisher like Frost is beyond me. This isn't just a rip-off, it's a rib-off.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
At 30, things are looking pretty spineless with MK4's Spine Rip. With MK4 going with the approach for remaking your favorite finishers in very dated 3D, many of these finishers go from aging like fine wine to milk. These look really bad in execution. Sub-Zero ranking their head off looks really bad, and the camera angle is just nauseating. Sorry Sub, the other decapitations are a head above this one.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Number 29, and we're looking at the very short-lived Cyber Ninja form of Sub-Zero with Cold Fusion. This sees Sub-Zero touching his wrist and pressing some buttons and doing some doodads, jumping on them, freezing the opponent, and blowing them both up. On paper, this sounds pretty interesting, but in execution, it's very bland. I know some people say that it makes sense because Sub-Zero didn't want to be cyberized, so he's ending himself and ending the opponent. But to me, the explosion is extremely underwhelming. Many other explosive finishers from this title just blow this one away, and sorry for the bad pun there. Similar to Cyber Sub-Zero, I'm also not a fan of Cold Fusion.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Hey, we're looking at another new title on this list, being the Mortal Kombat Tournament Edition. Unlike Scorpion, Sub-Zero only has one in this game, and it's a much better take of his skeleton rip. Well, now it's a spine rip. He still reaches behind them, but instead of pulling out the entire skeleton, he pulls out a very clean skull and spine. It's very fitting to Sub-Zero, minus it just being the head with the spine attached, but I think I like this one way more than the other one. My only complaint is just the downgrading of the graphics. It's kinda hard to really see what it is that he's holding because of the graphic downscale. Besides that, a major improvement over the console version.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Taking a second look at classic Sub-Zero from UMK3, but looking at a second finisher from Trilogy. This one is Ice Stalagmite, where he uppercuts the opponent, creates an icy stalagmite, and they fall on it. In terms of structure and pacing, it's very similar to Jade's second fatality from this game, albeit an ice spike instead of a pole they fall on, which I do find to be a little bit more fitting for Sub-Zero in this case, even though it's structurally the same fatality. It's quick, easy, simple, and fits the character well. Much better than the censored head rip. It's just a simple one, like the stalagmite, just gets right to the point.
Sub-Zero wins.
Let's jump to the first edition of MK3 with Henry Rollins or Unmasked Sub-Zero. This sees Sub-Zero do a cold wind blow similar to Superman from MK vs DC, freezing the opponent and then they just fall over and break apart. It's honestly really odd to see a tame and bloodless fatality after 2 years of major controversy. I feel it could have been loads better, but sorry, this one blows.
Sub-Zero wins. Flawless victory.
Let's revisit MK4 and wrap up the first era of 3D combat with Deep Freeze Uppercut. Unlike the MK2 version where you have to do 2 different inputs, this is just one, but they decide to merge them into one. Instead of keeping the camera static like in MK2, they decide to opt for 2 weird camera shots with 2 of the actions, making this come off extremely awkward. Honestly, the one biggest disappointment with this is the uppercut. There's barely any impact or oomph to the opponent being shattered. Just when you thought you would get a really good 3D remake fatality? Nope, this one just shatters your expectations.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
We're not done with shattering stuff because at number 24, we're going to be looking at the Super Nintendo version of MK Classic. Since they removed the head rip fatality from this title, Sub-Zero actually has an ice-based fatality, being Ice Shatter. He jumps back one step and then he freezes them, jumps up to them, and punches them and they shatter, leaving only their legs behind. Even though it's extremely simple, very tame, and not as over-the-top or violent as the one from MK2, it's really cool that the team went out of their way and create a really cool icy fatality for MK Classic. Now this only happens if you turn on the blood code in this version of the game. It is also really cool how this would be referenced years later and actually would be the inspiration for the Deep Freeze Uppercut from MK2 and as a brutality in future titles. Though people bashed on the SNES version of this game for the neutered fatalities, I can honestly say this is a pretty good one we got from this title.
Sub-Zero wins.
Speaking of neutered and toned down fatalities, Mortal Kombat vs DC. Yet we got ourselves another take of a deep freeze and hitting the opponent to shatter them. This time we see Sub-Zero do a big deep freeze, but he does some weird little things with his hands, freezes them, and then kicks them in the chest, giving him a good old Spartan kick that Leonidas would approve of. Even for the teen rating, this is still a pretty solid and effective fatality. It's a toned down finisher that kicks ass. We're not done with freezing and shattering things yet, and we're actually not done with MK vs DC because we're looking at Overhead Ice Smash. This is a kinda sorta remake of Icy Split from MK3, where he picks up the opponent, deep freezes them, and then drops them and they break apart and shatter. Yet again, this is another one of those fatalities that work in a teen-rated setting. You don't really need blood or gore, and if it did have blood and gore, it would definitely be in something like MK Deception. Also, seeing the opponent fall to the ground breaking apart just kinda cracks me up a bit.
Wins.
And speaking of mentioning MK3, Icy Split. This sees Sub-Zero pick up the opponent overhead and split them in half, breaking apart. The key difference to the one before this one, the major one, is there's actually a lot of blood and gore and lots of legs that fly out of this one for whatever reason. Secondly, he actually splits the opponent in half above his head instead of just dropping him to the floor. There's just a little bit more brutality in this one. This is also my favorite one to perform at my favorite barcade in Detroit, so whenever I play this with friends, I quickly show this off and they're just like, whoa, that's cool. We then laugh it off, and us, just like the opponent, it's a side-splitting routine.
Sub-Zero wins.
Just entering the top 20, and we are looking at the reimagining of MK2 with the Deep Freeze Uppercut Remake. This sees Sub-Zero put the opponent in a deep freeze, and instead of running up to the opponent and doing a second input to shatter the top half of their body, he just awkwardly slides at them and punches them in half. Yeah, my biggest complaint with this one is that the first half is really cool, and the second half it just looks off and it looks incomplete. Like, instead of the top half of the body blowing up, it just looks like you removed the top half or it just went flying away somewhere instead. Looks pretty cool, but still looks kinda incomplete. Of the deep freeze uppercuts, it's definitely one of the weaker ones.
Fatality.
Speaking of finishers that could have been better, Freeze Grenade from Mortal Kombat 2. This sees Sub-Zero be at full screen, throw some weird snowball at them, and then it causes them to explode. Yeah, this is really confusing, I know. Usually when I see this done in arcades or on YouTube videos, people tend to deep freeze the opponent and then throw the ice ball, making them explode, which I think would make more sense. Like, if they made the first half mandatory where you have to deep freeze the opponent and you throw it, it'd be a cool, like, shocking reveal fatality where he throws it and they just shatter instead. Because without that, just throwing the ice grenade at them just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Sure, they improved this a bunch as brutalities in the NRS era, but when you look at where it came from, it just seems a little awkward. Unlike a grenade, this one's just a dud.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
While we're talking about the NRS era, let's look at the remade finishers they've done from the classic trilogy, hence the Spine Rip from MKX. Personally, I found a lot of these remakes to be kind of lacking in the presentation and effectiveness departments. Sure, they are exact beat-by-beat remakes with some slight additions in there. In this one, it's the opponent trying to grab their head after it's ripped off their body, but it's just fine overall. I really wish they decided to add more instead of a weird comedic beat to it. Maybe an icy element to make it stand out, or even just some changing camera shots or something like that. Not a bad remake, but it could have been a little vertebrave with some innovations.
Sub-Zero wins.
Let's take a jump back at Mortal Kombat 9 by looking at the second Cyber Sub-Zero fatality, Brain Freeze. This sees Sub-Zero use 3 shurikens and shoot them into their face. The first one going in one eye, the second going in the other, and the third one he decides to charge like he's about to shoot a Kamehameha out of his hands, but it's just covered in more ice, to which it shoots in their head, scrambles their brain with a really unique X-ray effect we don't see in any other fatality in this game. It ends in a really funny and awkward way with their body jolting in a permanent position after scrambling their brain. This is definitely one of the standout ones, even if the finisher isn't very unique or specific to Sub-Zero, but I think the X-ray effect is the most memorable part of this fatality. A really good finisher from the Whirlpool Freezer with arms.
Sub-Zero wins.
From MK9 to MK1, we're looking at the second fatality called Brain Freeze, this coming from Bi-Han. This sees Sub-Zero create a giant ice wall, him grabbing the back of the opponent's head and slamming it into the wall. Their face peels off, he keeps slamming their head until the frontal lobe is completely missing, freezes the back of their head and shatters it into the wall and breaking the wall. As I stated before in all MK1 finishers ranked, if it weren't for the ice elements and creative shots, this would have been one of the lower ones in the entire game, and I think it's a very mid Sub-Zero finisher. Sure, it does something unique with the icy elements, but I think it's just fine overall. I do think the gore innovations are what definitely stand out the most with this one, especially the face being peeled away after being hit against the wall for a second time. Overall, it's still pretty good, but it could have iced things up a little bit.
Fatality. Sub-Zero wins.
Let's break away from brain freezes and continue our streak of spine rips, this time going back to Shaolin monks. What I like about this one is how Sub-Zero freezes the opponent while grabbing their neck so they can't really flail or move around as he tries ripping their head off. And after ripping the head clean off, the body thaws and just drops. It's also very explosively bloody with a fountain of blood flying out from their body. It's definitely a cool way to update the classic spine rip finisher by adding some cool icy elements to it. And it wouldn't be the last time we'd see it. Wink wink nudge nudge on that one. Yet again, we're looking at another reimagined spine rip at number 14, this coming from Mortal Kombat 9. This remake keeps things pretty simple and to the point by just having a simple camera shot, him grabbing their neck, pulling at their head with it cracking some bones, and then pulling one more time with the spine dangling and the body dropping. It's very simple, to the point, and I really like the addition of the neck bones cracking and the opponent screaming in pain. It's just a great touch right there. When it comes to spine rip remakes, this sets a high lumbar. We are not finished with Icy Split remakes, as we've got one more to cover from MKX. Chest Cold sees Sub-Zero freeze the opponent's chest with a huge icy block, shatter it, and reveal just nothing but the spine left in the middle. While the opponent's in shock, he grabs the vertebrae and snaps it, treats it as two handles, and splits the opponent in half. It's a unique way to innovate the Icy Split in a very cool way. It's very gross and disturbing. I also love all the fun camera shots and angles in there too, especially with the back blown out portion. That part always got me. If you ever need a ninja to support you, don't worry, Sub-Zero's got your back.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Let's go back to PS2 territory for a little bit by looking at Below Freezing from MK Deception. Man, if you thought that Bi-Han was very cold-hearted, this one just shows it off in a very dark way from Kuai Liang, freezing their legs and then sweeping them to break them off, leaving the opponent doing a really good Lieutenant Dan cosplay. As they crawl away in fear and in pain, Sub-Zero slowly approaches them, stomps on their chest, and their head just pops off. It's unique and innovative, and I love it a lot. It shows quite a dark side to Kuai Liang with his version of Sub-Zero. All I ask is Sub-Zero does this in the Mortal Kombat 2 movie coming out in 2025. I'll be a happy man.
Sub-Zero wins.
Our third and final Shaolin Monks remake fatality is definitely the best one, that being the Ice Blast. You get a really cool shot opening it up with Sub-Zero charging a deep freeze to freeze the opponent, and then he decides to wind up one giant ice ball in one hand, yeet it at the opponent, and they just explode. Remember that complaint I made at the freeze grenade from his MK2 finisher? Well, this is exactly what they needed to do to make it loads better. Add a deep freeze, some really cool camera shots, it's a bloody good time. Dare I say, an absolute blast. Cracking into the top 10 with a hairline fracture from MK1. If you're a fan of the anime Ninja Scroll, you'll notice this is a beat-by-beat remake of Tesai's death. The only thing that's different is Sub-Zero creating an ice blade, throwing it at them to split them in half. But when it flies back at the opponent, hits them in the face, and slide down the blade, those are shot-by-shot remakes. Outside of that reference, I think it's still a fine fatality. It's just definitely interesting using an ice blade as a boomerang to fly back at the opponent and hit them in the face. I do love the detail how they slide down, their head splits in half after their body just bisects as well. Bravo to you, Bihan. I guess in the new era, Liu Kang made you a weeb.
Fatality. Sub-Zero wins.
At number 9, we're looking at our second to last finisher from MK9, Have an Ice Day. This almost starts off the same way as Deception's Below Freezing by freezing the bottom half of his body, but instead after the opponent is all confused, he grabs their neck and just yanks the top half of their body off. It's very gross, effective, and innovative. Probably one of my favorite tiny details you notice is that the inside of Sub-Zero's opponent's body is frozen. Like where you see their intestines, you can see a bunch of icicles crystallizing in there. It's just really gross and a fun detail to see how frozen the opponent is right there. Another good thing I like about this finisher, it just shows off Sub-Zero's confidence. Literally, the opponent's half the man they used to be. Our third and final finisher from MKX is Bed of Ice. Sub-Zero decides to remake one of those nail beds from Ripley's Believe It or Not and kicks the opponent onto the bed of spikes. Since that didn't get the job done, he jumps on top of the opponent, digging them deeper into the spikes. As the opponent sits there and struggles, and you can actually hear their throat gargle with blood, which is just really disgusting, Sub-Zero does a quick curb stomp to dig them deeper into the spikes, and it finishes them off. What's really gross is how there's one eyeball that's rolling around as one of the spikes stuck through their head. I didn't give this one much credit back then, and I honestly think it's one of his better and more underrated finishers in the entire series. A good finisher for the opponent to catch some Z's.
Sub-Zero wins.
All the way at number 7, and we're finally looking at Mortal Kombat 11 with Executioner. Outside of spine rips, it's weird that Sub-Zero doesn't have too many decapitation fatalities, and this is a fun, unique way to do it. Freezing the opponent into an Executioner pose, their arms and head are the only thing exposed. He creates an icy X and then cuts their head off. As the head rolls to them, he picks it up, freezes it, and shatters it with the bits flying at the camera. Even though this is a very simple and effective fatality, all of the beats are just so effective and everything just flows so well together. I'd say on paper it sounds really good, but even cooler in its execution. Our final finisher from MK9 comes in at number 6 with Spinal Smash. Yet another cool, innovative way to recreate the spine rip finisher. Instead of grabbing their neck and ripping off the head with the spine attached to it, he reaches into their chest, rips the spine out with the skull still attached without their head deflating somehow, quickly deep freezing the opponent, and then he winds up with a home run hit, shattering the opponent. This includes some really cool elements, mashing up elements of the spine rip and the deep freeze uppercut to make a very unique and awesome fatality. Definitely one of my favorite ones from MK9. Actually, this is giving me an idea to do all MK9 finishers ranked, so let me know what you think about that down below. We are finally entering the top 5 with Deep Freeze Uppercut. After all of this time mentioning it, we get to see how cool it is. After doing your first input to Deep Freeze the opponent, you do your second one to uppercut them, leaving only their legs behind. Sure, it may be simple and it may just look a little dated, but honestly, the uppercut is what really sells it for me. The sound effect there with that giant shattering glass sound effect and the opponent breaking apart and all of the body parts flying apart is just awesome. This was definitely one of my favorite finishers finishers looking at MK2 forever ago, and it was actually the first Sub-Zero finisher I performed. A big thanks to Grand Finals Gaming for teaching me that forever ago. There have been several imitators of the deep freeze uppercut. This one just punches above all of them.
Fatality.
This far on the list, and we're not done looking at PS2 era finishers, as we're looking at the second one from MK Deception. Freeze and Throw sees him deep freeze the opponent once again, but instead of uppercutting them or throwing a snowball to break them apart, he walks up to them and grabs their head and then just yanks it off. My favorite thing he does with it is that he winds up by sliding back and then sliding forward, throwing the head at their body, and it shatters apart. It's such a cute, fun, and unique finisher. Definitely one of my favorite ones from Deception, and also one of my favorite Sub-Zero finishers of all time. Originally, this ranked at number 3, but I think a few more just edge out over this one. Overall, a top tier finisher.
Sub-Zero wins.
We're looking at the bronze medal at where it all began, the spine rip, also known as the ESRB maker. It's just so simple and effective, grabbing the opponent's head, ripping it off with this spine dangling. Now you may be looking at this now and saying it's not that big of a deal, it's very simple, and it looks a little outdated. But hear me out. This was a major contributing factor, bringing massive attention to parents and politicians regarding video game violence and the content. This was shown off during the 1993 congressional hearing of showing off how violent video games are. So yes, what you're seeing is actually a finisher that was a leading contributing factor to the ESRB being made. Because of all of the controversy this finisher started, there's no way I could have left it out of the top 3. Hell, back in 2021, this was the #1 finisher for that reason. But after looking back, I can honestly say that this is easily number 3, but 2 more do this one just as good, if not slightly better. Say what you want, Scorpion may be the poster boy of the series, but Sub-Zero is the poster boy for all of the controversy this game started.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Our runner-up goes to Spine Rip from Sub-Zero's cameo version in MK1. This is almost the exact same finisher, but does one unique thing to it, adding an icy element to it. He slides up and grabs the opponent's neck and starts freezing it. As their face begins to struggle, he lifts it and you see the neck start breaking apart. The head's pulled off with each column of vertebrae following along with it, even pulling out the sacrum at the bottom. Evil Sub-Zero is so happy he raises that head high. Not his, but the one he just ripped off. Of all of the ways this classic finisher has been remade, this is absolutely my favorite way they've done it. For that, it nabs the silver medal.
Fatality. Sub-Zero wins. Flawless victory.
Through process of elimination, we're looking at our number 1, which is Frozen in Time from MK11. If you managed to tune into Rainwaves' streams talking about Jedi Survivor, I accidentally spoiled this to good vibrations when I said I was going to be re-ranking this. But how could it not get the top spot? It's such a cool way to update this one for a modern audience. Sub-Zero slides at the opponent while creating an ice clone, they fly onto it and they get stabbed hanging upside down, reaches into their stomach and pulls out their spine, and then proceeds to pull on the spine more and rip off the head. I just love how he ends this with the freeze frame by slamming it back onto the spike, and then eyeball just flies out at the camera. Say what you want about MK11 in terms of quality, but when it came to fatalities, they nailed it out of the park. This captures so many great elements of Sub-Zero, his ice clone, sliding, and his infamous spine rip. It's absolutely timeless. For that, Frozen in Time is the best Sub-Zero finisher of all time.
Fatality. Sub-Zero wins. Flawless victory.
And there you have all Sub-Zero's finishers re-ranked from worst to best. Which one was your favorite and which one was your least favorite? Comment down below and I'd love to join the discussion with you there. While we're at it, they're just our opinions. Mine isn't the right list, it's just mine and I'd love to hear yours. So let's not have an argument down in the comment section, please. I'd like to say thank you a lot for all the feedback regarding content coming to the channel. I've been trying to diversify it a little bit. I'm trying to diversify a lot of my MK content, so I don't want to do exclusively all finishers ranked or re-ranked. I just wanted to do do Scorpion and Sub-Zero for now because it's just been something I've been thinking about doing for a while. I am focusing on all costumes ranked for not only Mortal Kombat characters, but other characters from other franchises. I know many of you have been asking for Spider-Man, so stay tuned on that. Also, I want to get more MK discussion videos out there too. Since Homelander drops in a couple of days at the time of this recording, I wanted to do another fun guest character video that's not guest character re-ranks or guest character finishers re-ranked. I can say those are coming, but that's not the video I have. It's another surprise video, so stay tuned for that. I do also have a few more discussion videos planned, and I will share those with you later down the line. So while you're at it, please share down below some video suggestion ideas, or I'll put that in the community tab and please let me know. I'd love your feedback and your input. Seriously, you all mean a ton to me, and I can't thank you enough for your support. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and share. As always, thank you so much for tuning into this video. My name is Nick, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Fight!